So that is maybe a framework, and I'll start with maybe something personal, which was my grandmother's house, which there was a moment where she had to go into a long-term care facility, and it was a big question of what to do with the house. An amazing opportunity to kind of imagine the house for a next generation. So one of the things my mom said was like, not flipping Granny's house. And I think the more, and it started off as cleaning out her house. In a way, she was a hoarder. So there's this rooms packed with stuff. And she would hide things in different places. There might be photos stuffed in the book, or money stuffed in the book. And through the process of cleaning out her house, which probably happened over 6 or 7 month period, I was doing it after work, was discovering the life of this woman. But in my mind, it was always just my grandmother. And then we're sort of seeing her as a human being. And through that process was sort of discovered, I think, a Canadian story. She immigrated to Canada in the mid-60s, fully in 1965, a bit earlier, came as a domestic worker, and so through cleaning out her house, I sort of uncovered letters, and then photos of the family that she took care of and the kids. At the time, so when she first came to Canada, she lived on Dunvegan Road in Forest Hill. But then things like bills, letters that from family members, so her father's, my great-grandfather, thanking her for sending money that she was using to then pay for rent. So that I think, but then bills too, and sort of got, I think, was able to sort of through these stories and I guess through piecing of different documents, was able to sort of piece together kind of what I imagine what Toronto was like for her, and everything from like photos of my mother, or report cards, or just other family photos, and I think a touching thing of her experience, and I think an experience that gets touched on when you sort of think of sort of maybe the kind of typical maybe domestic worker that came kind of mid-60s in Canada, or you think of a Jamaican woman. But yeah, to really personalized it. I'll start there. And that informed, I think, the design of the home, but also I think rooted in, when sort of speak of memories, is like individual stories that kind of often sometimes it speaks to then a collective experience.
I like how you touched on imagination being part of the process of reconnecting with these stories of the documentary memory. And I think that's often been a part of our way of remembering, is filling in what is left off the page or left behind the camera, and making the stories our own as we transfer it forward. When I think about the rituals for Black memory that I grew up with, it definitely takes me back to the home. And storytelling was really important to my mom, and I learned so much folklore too. But it wasn't until I was older that I realized so many of these stories come from West Africa, right? I learned about Anansi, but I didn't know where I come from. And the thing with folklore and storytelling too is it moves with the people. It evolves with who's telling the story,
space in particular was really resonant, as it was this space of, it was actually originally it was his apartment, and then he ended up moving somewhere else, but it was still a chair, a barber chair in the middle of a living room in his apartment building, that it was not, definitely not supposed to be there from a permitting perspective, but it was this real hub of people, specifically as in Montreal, especially the English West Indian community, and and it was interesting because I think going into high school, there were 3 or 4 of my friends that actually went to the same barber, and then we all kind of connected around the fact that we went to this one space, and he was it was a space where you would show up on a Saturday at say 10, 11 in the morning, and you might be there for hours, as it was just him, and there were people there telling stories, wild stories, everything, and it was a men's space. From being there as a teenage boy, you hear stories, hear things that your parents might not want you to hear. But it was this real tight community, and even going and going to the store to pick something up for Desmond's name, for Desmond, or just, it was this really specific type of space that was, it was based on the rituals of being and gathering, and as an architect, spatially, it's not a space designed for that use. It was adapted, but the space supported that ritual, and supported rituals that occurred there, and just a really slight counter to that is going to black barbershops where, and there's one particular that I remember going to that it just failed as a space because you had the chairs in one area, but everyone who waited was waiting, there was a screened wall. And so a huge part of the experience is the barber not necessarily talking to the person on the chair, but sometimes, but the people waiting, talking to each other and talking to the barber, and the barber being this MC, the person who manages the conversation and what happens in the space. And so the idea of how memory and space and ritual, I think, plays out in space is, I think, really tied to an idea for me of things that space that don't get in the way of allowing ritual and storytelling and memory to occur. And that's something that's really important.
And in a previous conversation, we talked about the ways that Black people take the spaces
Speak
that
up,
they're.
please, or get closer to the microphone, could you? Thank you.
The ways that Black people take the spaces, the scraps that are given to them, and repurpose it and use it in a different way. And that's really what you're talking about here, is that it wasn't intended to be a barbershop, but he made that a space that can hold the memories and the rituals that he wanted to do in those spaces.
Yeah, I'm assuming your barber, there was no appointments, right?
Oh. As a younger kid, you get pushed to the end.
The barber shop was a space of where just time, I remember just time collapsed.
Yeah.
There was no such thing, it was a half day event.
Yes.
And you show up and you're there and you're like, I don't know, if you're reading Sports Illustrated, there was like a couple of Essence magazines, or Share, and it was just like, that was it. You couldn't really plan the day
No.
after it.
No, it's a whole day thing. Aaron, would you like to share?
Sure, yeah. I wanted to say everything that you described, your experience with the barbershop, That was in Montreal, right?
Yeah.
I experienced the exact same thing in Kitchener.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like to see every single thing you described. And then Tur, I didn't know, when you talked about your perspective and what informed it, I didn't know that we had so much in common. I started Visit Black Canada, the archive, when my grandfather passed, but the real detail is that I stumbled upon the works when we were helping him move into long-term care. And so, like, hearing what you were saying, like, we had such similar, you know, exposures to, you know, to that memory, and I think it really informed. It's left such an impression on me that of course I started an archive. I started doing things that I didn't think were possible, just out of the poignancy of the memories that I had encountered. That said, when I think about the intersection of space and memory, and I've shared this with you all before, like I automatically go to the black basement, I'll say, or so we're talking a black family home. My grandparents came to Kitchener-Waterloo, 1965, right? So, but I'd say the slight difference between their experience perhaps and your mom's experience is that when they went to Kitchener-Waterloo, they're one of 3 black families there. And so the black household was key, but the black basement that I was able to, I got exposure to in the 80s and so forth as a kid. But for them in the 60s, that was where they had their sound systems, that was where they had their records, that was where they had their bar, and that was where they entertained themselves, because you couldn't hear that music elsewhere, and you couldn't get that comfortable elsewhere. There was simply no way to experience that, and so they built these spaces for themselves, and to that point, they even built the sound systems. I remember the speakers that my grandfather had in his setup. He made them himself. They'd buy the often whatever this and that, but he'd go buy the tweeters, and then they build the box that the speakers were housed in. And so that space was their dance hall. It was their family bar. It was and also where he would take his photos for that make up the bulk of my archive. That for me is just the best example I can share.
Yeah. And these are all ordinary moments that I don't think we realize how much it shaped our thinking and our sense of being until we got older. Because I think about the ritual of gathering a lot in my work now. So I'm wondering, in your respective practices, how do you challenge the neutrality of space, and how can we remake or make spaces for Black rhythm, sound, energy, and visuality that can be used to trouble and reshape space?
Sure. I think one is related to the question, and I think one aspect of how the question is framed is the idea of space being neutral, and I'll actually go to the barber, because if you think of what when he ultimately moved out of that apartment, the next person comes in and they're just in an apartment, and the idea of neutrality of space, I think is something that I think we often try to challenge in work.
Gotta go. Too bad, eh? That's so good. Brilliant already. Sad I have to leave, but gotta go to the next thing. Take care.
We'll see you the next
All right,
time.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, photographs and overview will be taken. Okay, good. Bye. All right, so I'm going to go out there. Okay, so I need to call Uber. That was brilliant, eh? Thomas Fisher Library, and that's what we just came from. Oh, well, That's a whole other thing. All right.